I wake before the dawn's first light. 5:30 a.m. by the clock on my nightstand. But truly, because my body refuses to forget the cadence of military time, my joints wake me quicker than any alarm, a dull ache in my left knee, a sharp twinge in my right shoulder. Parachute drops over Afghanistan, forced marches through frozen mountain passes, it's all written in these bones. I swing my legs over the side of the bed and steady myself for a moment, breathing in the quiet of the room. The bedspread still holds the faint scent of Margaret's lavender pillow spray, even 3 years on. I close my eyes for a heartbeat and remember her laugh echoing off these walls, the warm weight of her hand in mine. I pad across the hardwood floors, each step a reminder of every nail I hammered in this house, from foundation beams to the roof trusses. The hallway is dark, lit only by the soft glow of the hall clock's hands moving toward 6. I flick on the lamp beside the bedroom door. Soft yellow light spills onto the floral wallpaper Margaret chose and make my way to the kitchen. There I light the burner under the old French press. Water bubbles. I scoop a generous measure of coffee grounds. Strong black coffee, no sugar. Margaret always added a drop of cream. I keep it simple now. As the coffee brews, I stand at the counter and glance out the window. Silver ripples on Lake Greenwood catch the first hints of sunrise. Mist hovers where water meets air wisps of white that disappear as the day warms. I pour the coffee into my favorite mug, cracked at the rim but still sturdy, and lift it to my lips. The warmth seeps into me, chasing off the stubborn remnants of sleep. I step onto the porch boots, thudding softly against the weathered wood, and pull my cardigan tighter against the morning chill. Silence. It envelops me like a well-worn uniform. No children's chatter drifts across the lawn. No Margaret humming as she set the table. Just the distant call of a loon and the gentle lap of water against the dock. My eyes sweep the yard, the rose bushes pruned last week, the vegetable plot where I planted tomatoes and basil, the old oak at the far boundary where I hung a tire swing for Emily when she was little. The swing hangs empty now, paint peeling, but I keep it for memory's sake. I take a slow sip of coffee and let my mind wander back. 35 years in the Army taught me discipline. 6 months in Fort Benning, a decade in Germany deployments I'd never mention at a dinner party. But it also taught me to find peace in routine. The daily walk around the property became my ritual the day I retired. First, I checked the hedges clipped to neat rectangles by Margaret's exacting hands. Then the driveway where I patched a crack last spring. Finally, the garage roof still sturdy, though I repaired a loose shingle after last winter's snow. My breathing settles into a steady rhythm, matching the measured steps I take along the flagstone path. The stone bench beneath the old magnolia tree totals 3 decades of carvings, our initials, my promise to build this home for her the year we moved in. I pause there, resting a hand on the stone's cool surface. The magnolia's blossoms will arrive soon, painting the air with sweetness. Margaret loved those blooms, said they reminded her of home. Now they remind me of loss and of why I must keep going. When I circle back to the porch, the sun is a sliver of gold on the horizon. I finish my coffee, inhale the crisp pine-scented air, and set the mug on the railing. Today, like every day, I'll unpack my toolbox, top up the bird feeder, and tackle whatever small fix needs doing. But these simple chores are more than maintenance. They are my wordless conversation with her memory. Each board I sand, each nail I drive, each plant I water. I do it all because it keeps me in shape, and it keeps me connected to the life we built together. My phone buzzes, once a message from Emily. Be home for dinner. No details, no small talk. She's in Portland now, working 30 floors above a cold courtroom. I miss the way her voice used to light up this house. I type back, sure. See you at 6. I hesitate over the text, then hit send. I don't expect her, but I hold on to hope that one day our visits won't feel like chores on a calendar. Inside, I line up my tools, hammer, pry bar, measuring tape. Today I'll fix the wobbly railing on the back stairs, a loose board that's tripped me twice already. After that, I might repaint the swing's frame, gathering fresh courage to let gravity pull me down the memory lane. Whatever I choose, I know the work will fill my head, chase off the hollow ache of solitude. Before I step down, I glance once more at the lake. The mist has burned away, replaced by a canvas of pale pink and lavender. A pair of ducks glide across the glassy surface, unbothered by my presence. I close my eyes and savor the sunrise's warmth on my face. Dawn's solitude isn't loneliness. It's a gift, a quiet moment, before the world stirs a chance to honor the past while preparing for whatever comes next. I take a final breath, let the light strengthen me. Then I pick up the hammer and tool bag and set off across the yard, ready to build another day. I spend the late morning atop the roof, sunlight warming my back as I hammer in fresh shingles where winter's ice cracked the old ones. Each strike, thud, 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 echoes across the empty rafters of this house, reminding me how hollow it feels without my children's laughter. The ridge line glints in the sun, and I pause to loosen the grip on my hammer, wiping sweat from my brow. Up here, I'm in my element. Elevated, focused, reminded that every repair brings me one small step closer to order, one small victory against the creeping chaos of solitude. When I climb down, hands raw from gripping tools, I catch sight of the front hedge. It's overgrown again, skyward-bound tufts where I once trimmed it to neat squares. I fetch my shears and kneel in the gravel, pruning branch by branch. The blades snip crisply, and I imagine Emily playing hide-and-seek as a toddler, ducking behind this same green wall before popping out with a giggle. I trim a rogue sprig, then stop to place a hand over the old wood-carved heart etched with our initials. Her initials. My initials. A silent memorial to the family we once were. The phone is in my pocket, buzzing against my leg. I hesitate before fishing it out, afraid of both possibility and disappointment. It's Emily's name on the screen, but she's calling from Portland, where she lives in that high-rise apartment far from any hedges or porches. I answer. "Hey, Dad?" Her voice says, warm but distant, muffled by city noise. "I'm thinking of coming home next week, maybe for a long weekend." I feel my chest lift at the thought. "That'd be good, Emily. We'll have dinner like old times." She hesitates. "It's just that work's been crazy, Dad. I might have to rush back." The words come out apologetic, tired. I swallow the surge of frustration. "Just come. No rush back if it's not urgent. I've got time." "Okay," she says, her tone a blend of relief and guilt. "I'll let you know." I hang up and set the phone on the porch railing, its black surface glinting in the afternoon light. There's comfort in knowing she'll come, comfort, and a small ache beneath it. She's my daughter, and yet I count the months between calls. Once, when Margaret was alive, dinner table chatter echoed until late. Now I trace the countertop's grain, wishing I could carve our conversation into each knot. By midday, I'm fixing the garden gate's loose hinge. The metal screeches until I oil it. Then it swings with a smoothness that surprises me. I pause to marvel at the sound approval, maybe, that I'm getting things right. I imagine Emily's face lighting up when I show her how easily it opens now. She'll bring fresh bread from the bakery in town. We'll sit at the picnic table under the big oak, and for a moment I'll forget how long she's been gone. But I also think of Benjamin. He's halfway around the world again, consulting for some gallery or corporate art installation. He calls himself a creative director, though I never quite understood what that means. He shows up at holidays sometimes for Christmas, sometimes for a summer barbecue if his schedule allows. Often he disappears months at a stretch. The last time he was here, he barely looked at me, preoccupied by emails on his phone. He kissed me on the cheek, handed me a small gift, and then vanished again. I imagine him in some high-rise loft, surrounded by people eager for his expertise, and I wonder if he misses these oak floors, these chipped mugs, this old uniform hat I keep in a box. The afternoon sun pushes through the kitchen window as I sweep crumbs from the counter. Margaret would have scolded me for leaving granules scattered like breadcrumbs, leading nowhere, her way of saying, "Follow me." I gather the crumbs, pile them into my hand, and toss them into the sink. I wash my hands, catch sight of my reflection, a sprinkling of gray in my hair, creases at the corners of my eyes, shoulders that stoop just a little from years of bearing weight, both physical and emotional. I make myself a simple lunch, 2 slices of rye bread, a smear of mustard, a slice of ham, a handful of lettuce from the garden. I sit by the window overlooking the backyard where a single swing hangs still. The wind stirs it gently, and I rise to give it a push just a few inches to break the silence. I watch it sway back and forth its hollow creaks, filling the quiet air. A car approaches on the drive, smooth modern lines unfamiliar. My heart lurches. I set aside my sandwich and step outside, wiping my hands on my jeans. The vehicle slows and pulls into the garage court. Catherine Moreau steps out, her heels click-clacking on the concrete. My chest tightens. "Mr. Harris," she says, her voice polite but calculating. I hope I'm not intruding. She's Benjamin's fiancée. Her polished hair, her crisp blouse, the way she pauses as if evaluating my every move, all remind me of military briefing scenarios. One wrong word, and you'd be out of favor. "I was close by with Benjamin," she says, stepping closer. "We thought we'd drop off a document for you to review." I study her face. She smiles, but there's no warmth there, only that measured appraisal of someone used to closing deals. "Document a list of wedding vendors," she says. "Benjamin and I want everything perfect, and we need your input on local recommendations." I feel a surge of irritation. So soon after I pruned every hedge fixed, every roof tile set, every hinge right, and now they're back wrapping their business veneer around family ties. "I'll look at it later," I say, turning away. She raises a gloved hand. "I hope you remember Dad," she adds softly. "Always. Dad, never. Father. This home matters to Benjamin. It's part of our future." I grip the porch railing, my knuckles whitening. Future, the same word that slipped from Benjamin's lips last week in a video call when he asked if I'd consider moving closer to town, making the house part of his inheritance plan. I'd told him it wasn't for sale, that it belonged to me as long as I lived. He laughed it off. But Catherine's words make me wonder how many alliances have formed behind my back. She hands me an envelope and steps back into the car. The engine hums, then fades down the driveway. I watch until the taillights vanish, then return to the porch. The sun has dipped toward late afternoon, painting the lake in vibrant hues of pink and orange. I tuck the envelope into my shirt pocket, its weight a small but persistent reminder of the chasm widening between us. I finish the rest of my sandwich in silence, letting each bite ground me. Then I stand, pick up my hedge shears once more, and resume trimming. The hedge yields as I work tiny green clippings falling like confetti at a celebration I'm not invited to. Hand steady, I shape it back into order. When the hedge is neat again, I flick off the clippings and stare at my work. It's symmetrical, disciplined, unyielding. I step back, brushing dirt from my palms, and gaze at the house. Its frame glows in the dying light every window, a dark eye reflecting my solitude. I breathe in and exhale, refusing to let bitterness settle in these walls. Tomorrow, I'll install new lighting in the guest bedroom. Maybe then Benjamin or Emily will think of staying over. Tomorrow, I'll reinforce the garage door, tighten the loose board on the deck. Each task is a testament. I'm still here. I still care. I still fight. I head inside, gather my tools, and hang them on the pegboard in the garage. As I turn off the last light, the house sighs with me into twilight. The front door clicks shut, and I stand for a moment in the hallway listening. No laughter, no disagreement, just the steady beat of my heart and the whisper of what was and what might still be. I make my way back to the living room, settle into Margaret's favorite armchair, and pick up the envelope from my pocket. I'll open it tomorrow. For now, I close my eyes and let the hush of the house embrace me, readying myself for whatever comes next. At 11:15, the gravel crunched under the rental's tires as it eased into my driveway. I was in the garage tightening a loose panel on the tool rack when the sound reached me. I set down my screwdriver and walked out through the open door, wiping my hands on a rag. Sunlight spilled across the drive, glinting off the metal of my old pickup parked beside the tool bench. I straightened my back and tried to clear the knot of dread forming in my chest. The car's passenger door opened and Benjamin stepped out in a pair of dark-washed designer jeans and a crisp white shirt, untucked at the hem, the casual look of someone who wants to appear relaxed but has paid careful attention to details. He took a breath of the lake air, as if testing its authenticity. Behind him, a tall woman climbed out with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to heels, though she wore polished leather flats. She brushed a lock of dark hair from her face, revealing high cheekbones and eyes the color of smoky quartz. She took in the garage's chipped paint, the pegboard crammed with tools, and the faded army hat tucked on a high shelf. I could almost hear her appraisal ticking behind her calm expression. "Dad Benjamin," called before I could speak. He tried to sound casual, but his voice had that edge of rehearsed ease I'd heard over video calls. "I want you to meet Catherine Moreau." "Mr. Harris," she said, stepping forward with a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. She offered her hand, gloved in thin leather. "Thank you for inviting me." "Catherine," I said, shaking her hand firmly, though I kept my arm stiff, wary of sudden movements. Her skin was cool against my calloused palm. I led them inside, closing the garage door behind me and clicking off the overhead light. The kitchen was just as I'd left it hours earlier. The counter swept clean, the coffee mug I'd put outside, now waiting on its coaster. I set my rag on the table and gestured toward the living room. "Welcome. Would you like something to drink?" Benjamin shook his head. Catherine paused, tilting her head slightly. "Just water, please," she said, voice quiet but precise. She stepped through the threshold, brushing past the threshold of oak beams Margaret and I had hand-selected. The living room's floor-to-ceiling windows framed the lake beyond, rippling in the midday sun. My sturdy oak furniture, well worn and scarred by use, seemed out of place beneath her gaze, as though she expected velvet sofas and silk drapes. I led them to the sofa and offered water from the crystal jug on the side table. Benjamin sat first, collapsing into the cushions with an ease I envied. Catherine slid in beside him, her posture perfect, back straight, legs crossed at the ankles. I sat in Margaret's favorite armchair across from them, hands folded in my lap. There was a moment of silence as Catherine took a small sip. I watched her meticulously replace the glass on its coaster exactly in the center, sending a soft echo across the wood surface. I could feel her measuring me, my stooped shoulders, the lines around my eyes, the way I shifted in the chair, seeking weakness, vulnerability. My hands itched to fold around my coffee mug, to draw comfort from its warmth. Benjamin cleared his throat. "Thanks for letting us drop by, Dad. Catherine and I wanted to talk about the wedding." She supplied voice, smooth. I nodded, leaning back. "I'm listening." Benjamin glanced at her before speaking. "We've set a date for the ceremony exactly 4 weeks from today." He pulled a slim envelope from his pocket and handed it to me. "That's the formal invitation. You'll get the official one in the mail next week." I took the envelope, noting the heavy cream-colored paper and the gold-embossed script on the front. Inside was the invitation: a lakeside chapel, a country club banquet, a note at the bottom that said, "Your presence is the greatest gift." I slipped it back into the envelope and laid it on the coffee table untouched. "Congratulations," I said finally. "I'm happy for you both." Catherine tilted her head, studying me. "Thank you. But we also need your help." Benjamin leaned forward. "We've compiled a list of vendors, caterers, photographers, florists. You know this area better than anyone. We'd appreciate your recommendations." I suppressed a sigh. "I'll have a look." I stood to fetch my notepad, but Catherine shook her head. "Actually," she said, "we'd like to discuss something else first." Her tone was courteous but firm, like a closing lawyer. I set aside the notepad. "Go on." She exchanged a quick glance with Benjamin, then turned back to me. "Your home has always been part of our family's story. Catherine and I have been talking about where Benjamin and I might settle after the wedding." She paused as if searching for words. "We'd like you to consider your house in the future in terms of inheritance and practicalities." My chest tightened. "This house isn't for sale," I said quietly. "It's where I live." Catherine nodded, lips curving in a polite smile. "Of course. We weren't asking you to sell. But as you know, properties on Lake Greenwood have appreciated significantly in recent years." She allowed that to linger. "We thought it might make sense to discuss long-term plans, perhaps even options like downsizing, making things more manageable as you get older." I leaned forward, placing my elbows on my knees. The floorboards beneath my feet creaked softly, as if echoing my unease. "My home is where I intend to stay," I said. "I built it for Margaret and me. It always belonged to her, and now it belongs to my memories and the life we shared." Benjamin shifted, opening his mouth, then closing it. Catherine's eyes flicked to him. "We understand," she said, tone smooth as glass. "We just want to make sure we involve you in planning." She leaned closer, voice almost conspiratorial. "After all, you have good taste. Your recommendation for catering at the fall fundraiser last year was perfect. You know more local contacts than we could ever hope to find." I nodded, already regretting the warmth in that gesture. It was exactly the opening they needed. I could feel Benjamin's eyes on me, waiting for some sign of acquiescence. But I stayed still, keeping my face closed as a fortress. "There's another matter," Benjamin said at last, voice low. "Margaret left you quite a sum when she passed. If you ever considered diversifying your assets," my heart thumped, "leave Mrs. Harris's memory and wealth untouched." "I manage my finances just fine," I said. "I don't need advice on that." Catherine's lips quirked with understanding, as though my resistance was predictable. "Of course," she said. We simply want to ensure you have support, especially with everything involved in the wedding and then life afterward." She placed a slim card on the table, her business card. "If you change your mind, feel free to reach out." Her hand lingered over the card for a fraction of a second, as if daring me to pick it up. I watched, resisting the urge. My house wasn't for sale. My memories weren't currency. And my pride wasn't for barter. We talked a bit longer, Catherine asking about local artisans, Benjamin reminiscing about childhood summers on the dock. I answered in polite fragments, careful not to reveal too much. They slipped past the living room into the dining room, examining the oak table running fingertips along the grain. I followed at a distance, feeling like an intruder in my own home. Eventually, the sun edged lower, slanting gold across the hardwood floors. I ushered them back to the porch, offering parting thanks. Benjamin hesitated at the threshold. "We're having you at dinner tonight, Dad," he said softly. "At our place." Catherine stood behind him, her posture unyielding. She nodded once, crisp as a formal salute. 7 o'clock, she said. "We'd like to discuss more in detail." Her tone bore no question, only expectation. I nodded, saluted her unspoken command. "I'll be there." They drove away, gravel crunching in my ears. I watched until the road swallowed their car. The porch felt emptier when I returned inside. Lights dimmed, the invitation still lying on the table like a landmine. I picked it up, finger tracing the gold letters. "Your presence is the greatest gift." I set it down, head throbbing. The cedar roof I'd just repaired felt flimsy somehow, the hedges too neat, the swing too still. I poured myself a cup of coffee, cold now but strong, and carried it back to Margaret's armchair. I cradled the mug, tasting bitter resolve. They called this a family matter. I called it an ambush. I could see their plan first, the invitation, then the gentle probing, next the subtle pressure to dip into my savings, and finally the request I'd anticipated, asking me to sign over my house as an early inheritance. I wouldn't be so easily swayed. Outside, the lake's surface glowed in the late afternoon sun. I stared at it, unblinking. The ripples told me one thing: life always moves forward, whether you're ready or not. I took a deep breath, set the mug on the table, and stood. The wedding invitation would stay unopened for now, and I'd attend dinner tonight, but on my terms. They may be polished in their smiles, but I'd learned long ago to read between the lines. The house creaked around me as I walked through each room, touching a wall. Here, a picture frame; there, Margaret's favorite painting of a summer moon on her bedside table, the rifle I carried home after my final deployment leaning in the corner. This house was built with sweat and love, not spreadsheets and lawyer fees. And as long as I lived, it would remain my fortress, my memory, my home. I stepped onto the porch one last time, watching the sun sink behind the pines. The breeze whispered through the oaks, carrying promise and warning. I closed my eyes, drew in the cool air, and stood my ground. Dinner could wait. I still had the whole afternoon and a lifetime of resolve yet to be tested. The smell of garlic and tomato filled the air as Catherine set down 2 steaming lasagna portions on the dining table. The townhouse was immaculate: white walls, polished floors, minimalist decor. It felt colder than my own kitchen, stripped of the warmth that came from worn furniture and family photographs. I took my seat across from Benjamin, the glow of the chandelier casting even light over his carefully tailored suit and Catherine's silk blouse. "Dig in," Catherine said, ladling a final sprinkle of Parmesan over my plate. She smiled, a practiced curve of her lips, but her eyes remained calculating, the way I'd learned to read adversaries in Afghanistan. I picked up my fork and tasted the lasagna rich and layered, the pasta sheets tender, the cheese perfectly melted. I nodded my approval. It was delicious, and I meant it. But taste alone wouldn't determine my answer tonight. Benjamin reached for his glass of red wine. "Dad," he began swirling the liquid and watching the legs run down the glass. "We really appreciate you coming over. It means a lot." He paused, then cleared his throat. "We wanted to talk about arrangements for the wedding and some practical matters." I took another bite, chewing slowly. The lasagna warmed my chest as I considered his words. I lifted my gaze toward him and Catherine. "Go on," I said between bites. Catherine sipped her white wine and set it down gently. "Your home is, and always has been, a big part of our family history," she said, voice soft as satin. She tapped the table, tilting her head. We thought it made sense to discuss inheritance planning. My fork clattered against the plate as I put it down. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. The corners of her mouth twitched as though she expected me to smile in agreement. I kept my face neutral, though my heart was pounding. Inheritance planning. It was a polite euphemism for, "We want your house." Benjamin clocked my reaction and leaned forward, voice earnest. "Mom passed on some savings when she died," he said, his eyes pleading. "I've been thinking maybe you'd be open to discussing how your assets could support our future. To help us get started. Especially the house, it's worth a fortune now." I felt the room tilt, caught between memory and resentment. The house Margaret and I built, every beam cut with love, every nail pounded with hope, was suddenly currency. I forced myself to breathe. "Benjamin," I said quietly, "Margaret and I built that house for our life together. I intend to live here as long as I can. Selling or signing it over isn't part of my plan." Benjamin's face fell, but Catherine was undeterred. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at me with sincere eyes. "We understand, but you're not getting any younger. Maintenance alone, landscaping, repairs, utilities, it can become overwhelming." She stretched her fingers, and her rings caught the light diamond and platinum. "Downsizing to something more manageable might be worth considering. Perhaps taking some of that equity and diversifying." I swallowed, fighting the urge to rise from the table and leave. The lasagna, the wine, it all tasted like betrayal. I rested my forehead in my hand for a moment, blocking out the opulent chandelier and the sleek dining chairs. In my mind, I heard Margaret's voice, gentle and firm. "Take care of yourself, Wesley. Don't let anyone talk you into giving away what's rightfully yours." I lifted my head and met Catherine's gaze. "You speak of managing assets, of diversifying equity, but those are financial decisions. This is a home. It's where I stitched curtains with your mother, where I built that swing for Emily, where Benjamin took his first steps." My voice cracked on the last word, but I held firm. "It's not an asset to be liquidated. It's my life." Benjamin cleared his throat and reached for his water glass. "I get that, Dad," he said. "But think of it this way. If you wanted to travel or fund a special project like that Veterans Initiative you talked about, you'd free up capital." He waved a hand, impatient. "You've mentioned converting part of the house for veterans. That takes money?" I felt a flicker of pride at his real concern for my projects, but let it burn out. "I have the funds I need," I replied. "The bank pays the mortgage, my savings handle repairs. If I ever decide to do more, I'll do it." Catherine leaned forward, voice low but insistent. "Sometimes the most generous thing you can do for your children is to help them get started. A wedding is expensive, not to mention the house itself, property taxes, insurance. They're all part of the package." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Benjamin and I could use some help." Her words settled over me like a storm cloud. The wedding, the one they'd set a month from today, loomed like a deadline. I'd assumed they would ask for money to help with vendors, maybe the ceremony itself. But this was bigger. They wanted a piece of my past, my refuge. I felt anger boil in my chest. "I'm happy to help with the wedding," I said, voice tight. "If you need recommendations for local caterers or musicians, I can provide contacts. But I won't give up my home." Benjamin's eyes narrowed. "We're talking inheritance planning, something more formal. You could sign documents now rather than leaving everything to chance." He tapped the table. "It'll save legal fees later." I swallowed back my retort. "I know what inheritance planning is, but I'm not signing anything tonight." I folded my arms across my chest. "I'll help with guest lists and craftsmen. I'll even host the rehearsal dinner here. But I won't sign away this house." Silence stretched across the polished table. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall behind Catherine. She tilted her head as though adjusting to recalibrate her strategy. "All right," she said at last, voice composed. "Just think about it. Sit on it for a few days. Talk it over with Emily. Maybe consult your attorney. We'll send over the paperwork for you to review." She withdrew a slim folder from her handbag and placed it before me. "No rush," she added, smiling. "Whenever you're ready." I stared at the folder, its beige cover imprinted with the name of a law firm. The pages inside would contain clauses, signatures, notary seals. I imagined signing a pen sliding across paper my consent to relinquish what Margaret and I had forged. The thought made me ache. Benjamin attempted a conciliatory tone. "This isn't about pressuring you. It's about planning responsibly." He gestured to the candles flickering in the centerpiece, their flames dancing. "It's our wedding, but it's your legacy too." I looked at him, my son grown and polished, earnest but misguided, and my heart twisted. "Legacy," I repeated softly. "Legacy isn't paper and signatures. It's memory and sacrifice." I pressed my palms to the tabletop. "Your mother and I poured our lives into that house. I won't let it become a brokerage asset." Catherine rose gracefully, smoothing her skirt. "Thank you for your time," she said, composing her expression into one of appreciation. "We'll check in again soon." Benjamin followed her lead, standing and pushing back his chair. "Dinner was great," he said, though his tone was curt. "Thanks for coming, Dad." I stood as well and walked them to the door. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the townhouse steps. Benjamin lingered at the top of the steps, hand on the railing. Catherine's heels clicked as she took a step down. I held the door open until they were outside, then closed it firmly behind them. Inside, the silence returned. The candles burned down to stubs. The lasagna cooled on the table. I walked back into the living room where the invitation from Part 3 still lay unopened on the coffee table. I glanced at the folder Catherine had left behind, her subtle proposal, her carefully wrapped request. I shuffled the lasagna dishes into the sink, turned on the tap, and let the water run over them, washing away the remnants of that meal. As the dishes clinked under my hands, I realized something they'd underestimated: my resolve. I had weathered storms in far-off lands, led men through ambushes, stared down fear when every instinct urged surrender. They were dealing with a colonel who knew how to stand his ground. I finished rinsing the plates, dried my hands, and turned off the kitchen light. The hallway beyond was dark, but I could feel the weight of my choices pressing in. Legacy was more than inheritance. It was the house itself, the memories it held, and the life we built together. I would protect that legacy with every ounce of strength I had left. I paused at the doorway to Margaret's old bedroom, now empty, but for her scent lingering in the closet. I took one deep breath, let it out slowly, and moved on. The night would bring its own restlessness. I knew I'd lie awake, mind racing through clauses and counters. But no document, no request, no polite proposal would force me to give up the home that was mine as long as I lived. I walked to the window overlooking Lake Greenwood. The water lay still under the moon's reflection, untroubled by my son's ambitions or Catherine's agendas. I placed a hand on the glass, letting the cool surface steady me. Outside, the night was quiet, but my heart was resolute. I would face whatever came next, inheritance discussions or wedding dinners, with the same clarity that guided me through 35 years of service. This was my house, my home, my legacy, and nothing would change that. I arrive at Benjamin and Catherine's townhouse a week after our lasagna dinner. The sun has already dipped behind the roofline, and the streetlights cast a pale glow across the driveway. I park my truck and step onto the stone path, boots echoing against the brick facade. Inside, the air feels warm and impeccably scented, some handcrafted diffuser filling the rooms with hints of jasmine and sandalwood. They lead me into the living room, where a low couch faces a wall-mounted TV displaying muted holiday ads. A single lamp glows in the corner, its light reflecting off Catherine's polished floors. "Thanks for coming, Dad," Benjamin says, settling into the couch cushions as if it were his throne. "We've made some decisions and wanted to run them by you." He pats the seat beside him. I stand at the threshold, arms folded, resisting the urge to lean against the doorway. Catherine appears with 2 glasses of wine, sliding one into my hand before taking a seat on the opposite end of the couch. She tucks her legs beneath her, folding her dress at the knee. "We've looked at some consultants for the estate planning," she says, voice soft but exact. I take a sip of the wine, dark, fruity, too sweet for my taste, and place the glass on the coffee table. "You found someone?" "We did," she says. She pulls out a slim folder embossed with a law firm's logo. "We spoke with Harrison and Cole. They specialize in elder law and estate matters. They suggested a few options: downsizing, establishing a trust, maybe refinancing to free up some capital." Benjamin leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Basically, what they're saying is that your house has a lot of equity. If you ever wanted to sell or use it as collateral, you could unlock hundreds of thousands of dollars for us to start our life together." He picks up the folder and slides it closer. I nod, though my stomach twists. The folder contains projections, charts, and bullet points, numbers, and percentages laid out with clinical precision. It's the language of commerce, not family. I open my mouth, then close it. I remember Margaret's hands guiding mine as we selected these windows, our laughter echoing when the contractor mismeasured the porch. This house was never about profit. Benjamin's eyes glint in the lamp's light. "We're not asking you to vacate," he says quickly. "But maybe consider a smaller place. A condo in town would be easier on you, less upkeep, no long driveway, closer to the hospital and grocery store. You could keep part of the proceeds for yourself, travel, hobbies, whatever you like, and help us with wedding costs." Catherine folds her hands. "It's really quite sensible. We even toured a few options downtown. Modern amenities, minimal stairs. We thought you'd appreciate it." I stare at the folder's glossy pages, then lock eyes with Benjamin. "Did you tour any places with me?" I ask. "Did you ask if I wanted to see them?" He shifts uncomfortably. "We thought we'd get your thoughts first," he says. "You know, see what you'd be comfortable with." The soft hum of the refrigerator fills the silence. I set the wine glass aside and rise to my full height, boots creaking against the wood floor. "This house isn't a commodity," I say. "It's my home, I poured my sweat into every board and nail here. I sat on that porch with Margaret watching the sunset over the lake. I planted those rose bushes she loved. It isn't for sale. It never will be. Benjamin leans back, rubbing his forehead. Dad, we're just trying to plan responsibly. A wedding, a new life, those things cost money. It's our future we're talking about. I feel rage surge like a storm tide. My future is right here. In these walls, in that porch swing I built for Emily in the garden where she chased fireflies. It's not a business venture for you to mortgage against. I'm not your ATM. Catherine stands, smoothing her dress. We didn't mean to offend you. We only want to make sure you're looked after. I'm looked after. I interrupt, my voice low and steady. I've got plans. I've got savings. I've lived on discipline and frugality. I don't need a high-rise condo to be cared for. Benjamin rises, voice strained. So you won't even consider it? You won't help us with the wedding at all? We expected what I demand, stepping forward until I'm closer than I've ever been in this polished home. You expected me to break my word to Margaret, to treat our home like a fucking equity tool. You expected me to sign away my life while I still have it. Catherine's eyes flicker to Benjamin. He closes his mouth. The room shifts with tension, lamplight bending on their faces. Benjamin looks shaken. Catherine's calm mask falters for a moment. Benjamin runs a hand through his hair. This isn't about the house alone, he says. It's about ensuring your legacy, making sure you're protected, and helping us start ours. I shake my head, pain and anger warring in my chest. Legacy isn't paperwork filled out years before your parents die. Legacy is memory. It's choosing to honor someone's life, not auction off their home before they're gone. I walk to the window and stare out at the night-shrouded lake. The water glimmers under moonlight, unmoved by these petty demands. I lean my forehead against the glass, tasting the cool night air through the pane. Benjamin, I say, softening, I love you, but I won't give up this house. Not for fundraising, not for wedding costs, not for practicalities. It's where I'll follow Margaret when my time comes. I won't sign an early inheritance. I won't downsize. I won't be guilted into selling the life we built. Behind me, I hear Catherine's breath catch. I close my eyes, swallow the lump in my throat, then pivot back to face them. You can leave now, I say. Or you can stay, but this conversation is over. I won't revisit it. Benjamin's shoulders slump. He looks at Catherine, then back at me. Fine, he says quietly, if that's how you feel. Catherine steps forward, voice lowered. We'll respect your decision. But please remember we offered in good faith. I nod, my voice calm but firm. I remember. I hand back the folder. This belongs to you. I have no use for it. They take the folder and move toward the door. Benjamin hesitates at the threshold, his eyes searching mine for a crack I won't show. He says, I hope you'll come to the rehearsal dinner next week. I'll be there, I reply, as much to myself as to him. They leave, and I close the door behind them. The house exhales into silence. The footsteps gone, the diffuser's scent lingering like a memory of their presence. I set the wine glass on the sideboard and grab my coat. The night air on the porch is sharp, cutting through the residue of roses and sandalwood. I stare at the water's edge, unblinking, and whisper, not for sale. I stand there for a long time, listening to the lake's quiet lullaby, letting the moonlight stitch resolve into my bones. This house is my legacy. I'll defend it until my last breath. I spent most of the next morning overseeing the new porch railing installation, inspecting each cut of cedar for straightness, each nail for flush alignment. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a burnished gold, and I decided to take a break. I grabbed my old binoculars from the porch shelf, left over from bird-watching trips with Margaret, and strolled to the back garden. The rose bushes I'd pruned weeks ago were nodding in the breeze, their petals unfurling like silent invitations. I settled into the Adirondack chair beneath the old oak binoculars resting in my lap. Normally I'd be tracking a pair of bald eagles that nested nearby, but today my mind kept drifting back to last night's confrontation. The townhouse dinner, the charts and projections, the way Benjamin's eyes flickered when I refused, how Catherine's polite smile snapped like a trap closing. And most of all, how I'd felt the cold twist inside me, betrayal sharper than any shrapnel wound. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the sun's warmth on my face, and let the world settle. A distant hum of lawnmowers, chirp of crickets emerging early. Then faintly voices low and hurried, drifting from beyond the fence line. My heart thumped. That edge of sound stirred memories of ambush drills, of listening on comm radios in the desert. I slipped from the chair, binoculars dangling, and moved toward the garden gate, every footfall measured silent. The gate's latch squeaked quietly as I lifted it, and I slipped through into the narrow strip of land between my property and the neighbors. Catherine's townhouse garden buzzed with its own light, discreet landscape lamps, casting halos over manicured flower beds. I crept along the shadow of the fence, each board a barrier between me and the conversation unfolding. Their voices were hushed but urgent. I froze, hearing Emily's soft whisper, her voice measured but tense. He's not going to sign anything, I know that. But if we can get a petition filed, the court will appoint a guardian. It's not about him being crazy. It's about being unfit. Once that's decided, we control the finances and the house. Benjamin's voice, low and tight, answered, "Yes, but we need evidence. Marcus Ellington said we'd need medical records, notarized statements. We can't just walk in and declare him incompetent. We have to build a case." Catherine's tone cut in crisp as autumn air. "I talked to Dr. Caldwell. He'll write an assessment. I'm meeting him tomorrow morning. He's prepared to testify to his concerns about his memory issues, forgetfulness, he'll call it. We'll need letters from neighbors who claim he's been heard talking to himself." I pressed my back against the fence, heart pounding. Talking to myself, I whispered my own thoughts at night, yes, but never incoherently, never confused. I'd always kept meticulous records, paid bills on time, managed my affairs with precision. The idea that they'd manufacture evidence. My hands itched to grip the fence and tear it down. Emily's voice trembled slightly. "I hate that we're doing this to Dad. But Benjamin says we're running out of options. He's drowning in debt. And you said Catherine's parents aren't footing the bill. They expect a big wedding, but without help it's impossible." Benjamin sighed. "It's not just the wedding. I've got back taxes, loan defaults. If we can unlock the house's equity, we can clear everything. Then Mom's life insurance, then our savings, everything flows legally." I felt bile rise in my throat. They talked as if our past, Margaret's memory, and my lifetime of work were just entries on a ledger to be exploited. As if I were a resource to be rationalized away. I moved a foot and a twig snapped under my heel. Their voices stiffened. Dad Benjamin's voice called low. "Emily. Catherine." I froze like a rabbit in headlights. They must have heard that snap. I retreated a step, heart slamming, willing the fence to swallow me, to dissolve the shadows into which I could vanish. But instead, Catherine stepped forward, lantern in hand, her silhouette sharp against the townhouse windows. Emily hovered behind her, and Benjamin followed. I flattened against the fence, breath held. Through a gap I saw their faces lit by that lamp. Catherine's calm mask. Emily's guilty shame, Benjamin's determined desperation. They huddled together, reading from a tablet screen, bulleted points, plan outlines. They didn't spot me. "I'm meeting Dr. Caldwell at 9, Catherine said, checking her phone. "He'll draft the initial report by Friday." Emily's hand fluttered to her mouth. "Are we sure this won't destroy him?" Benjamin shook his head. "He's already destroying himself. He's refusing to accept help. We're doing what we have to do." I swallowed, taste bitter. "Doing what you have to do." Their words devoid of love. I backed toward my own property's gate inch by inch until I could slip back. My mind raced. They were serious. They'd gather testimonies, doctor's notes, neighbor affidavits. They'd file a guardianship petition and strip me of my rights. By next week, my house, my home could be out of my hands, and all because they saw dollar signs where I'd placed memories. I slipped back through the garden into my own yard, careful to close the gate without noise. My legs trembled as I returned to the Adirondack chair. I sat head in hands, heart racing like a soldier's under fire. Betrayal burned. I felt the old anger well up, training kicking in, assess, plan, counter. Betrayal was worse than any wartime ambush. Enemy forces knew you were there. This was treachery from within. My son, my daughter, my new daughter-in-law, they conspired to rob me of what I held dearest. I let the sun sink lower, painting the garden in long shadows. My breath calmed. I rose and walked the length of the rose beds, tracing my fingers along thorny stems. Each bloom glowed with stubborn life, pushing through adversity just as I would. That evening I didn't cook dinner. Instead, I poured a whiskey over ice, carried it to Margaret's armchair, and replayed the conversation in my mind. Dr. Caldwell affidavit from neighbor's guardianship petition, all steps I'd anticipated but hoped they wouldn't take. I took a long sip, feeling the burn down to my gut. I knew what I had to do. I'd contacted Marcus Ellington and Sarah Collins, the notary and attorney, on speed dial, and asked them to prepare countermeasures, revocable trusts, no contest clauses, my own medical evaluation to prove competency. I'd gather my own witnesses, neighbors, veterans from the local support group. I'd show the court a man of sound mind, clear account records, no signs of dementia. As the room darkened, I found a measure of resolve. They thought they could trap me with paperwork and legal maneuvering, but I'd weathered storms more brutal than this. I had allies, and I'd protect my home with every ounce of discipline I'd honed in uniform. I finished the whiskey and set the glass aside. Outside, the garden was quiet, but inside I felt the quiet click of strategy forming. They'd made their move, now I'd make mine. And they'd see that Colonel Wesley Harris didn't back down when cornered. Not then. Not ever. I waited until the sun dipped beneath the pines, turning the sky a bruised purple before calling Emily. My daughter's number glowed on the screen, one missed call, 2 messages unanswered. I stood on the porch swing, loose boards creaking like old joints, and tapped the call icon. The dial tone pulsed, then clicked. Dad Emily's voice was softer than I remembered, strained, guarded. "Meet me at the gazebo," I said, voice low. The gazebo sits at the edge of the lawn, overlooking Lake Greenwood. Just you. There was a pause. "Okay," she whispered. I hung up and pocketed my phone, my heart thumping with a mix of dread and resolve. I paced the porch while the crickets tuned up their chorus. My palms were damp. I tightened my cardigan around my shoulders, though the evening air was warm, and stared out at the lake's dark mirror. The hush of twilight felt like the calm before a storm. Moments later, I saw her approaching along the flagstone path. Emily walked with that practiced composure of her shoulders squared, hands folded behind her back. In the fading light, Her silhouette looked both grown and frightened. I stepped off the porch and met her halfway, where the pale lantern of the gazebo cast a pool of yellow light. "Dad," she said, voice small. She stopped at the edge of the lantern glow face, half hidden in shadow. "Sit," I said, nodding toward the wooden bench. She obeyed, folding her legs neatly beneath her back, straight. I sat beside her, leaving a respectful space nearly a foot between us. For a moment neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft lapping of water against the shore and the distant hum of cicadas. I took a deep breath. "Emily." I began watching her profile against the darkening lake. "I heard your conversation the other day." She stiffened. A loose strand of hair fell across her forehead. She brushed it aside with a trembling hand. "Dad, you and Catherine and Benjamin whispering in the garden," I said, voice firm but not unkind. "You talked about filing for guardianship, about declaring me unfit to manage my affairs." Her eyes widened, tears glinting in the lamplight. "It wasn't like that," she said, voice cracking. I kept my gaze on the lake, taking a slow breath. "I want to hear it from you," I said, "because I heard Catherine mention a doctor's report, affidavits neighbors who claim I talked to myself." She swallowed hard. "It was theoretical," she whispered. "I never thought they'd actually go through with it." I turned to face her, placing my hands on my knees. "Theoretical," I echoed. "You sat there plotting how to take away my rights, my house. Does that feel theoretical to you now?" Her shoulders sagged. She looked away, staring down at her hands. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry." I narrowed my eyes, measuring her sincerity. "Sorry isn't enough. You all counted on Margaret's legacy to bail Benjamin out of his debts." She flinched. "Ben's debts are crushing him: credit cards, loans, taxes. He's desperate." I pressed my lips together. This was my little boy, the one I carried on my shoulders at the 4th of July parade, the one who learned to ride a bike on the gravel driveway. Now he was a man drowned in numbers, willing to betray his own father. "Did you think about how it would look if the court appointed a guardian for me?" I asked quietly. Neighbors, gossip papers file a story. Elderly Colonel Harris declared incapacitated. That's what they'd call me, a broken old man. Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks. She brushed at them with her fingers. "I never wanted that," she said. "It was a private conversation. Hurt feelings, worries. I didn't know it would go this far." I closed my eyes, feeling the ache of betrayal claw at my heart. "They all know that I'm sharp," I said, "that I manage my finances, that my diagnoses show no cognitive issues. They plan to twist my concern for security into warning signs of dementia." Emily's lips trembled. "Dad, please don't hate us." I opened my eyes, meeting her gaze. "Hate? No. I'm disappointed." I ran a hand over the worn wood of the bench. "I raised you and Ben to be proud, to protect what matters, honor family integrity. You're talking about stripping me of everything overnight." Her voice shook. "I love you, Dad. I never stopped loving you." "I know," I said softly, "but love doesn't excuse betrayal." I leaned forward, voice gentling. "I called you here because I needed to know where you stand. Are you with my side or theirs?" Emily swallowed, blinking rapidly. She looked down again, then back up, determination flaring in her eyes. "I'm with you, Dad," she said. "I was scared. I thought if we could secure the house, everything would be, easier for everyone. I let Ben and Catherine push me. I'm sorry." I studied her face, her tear-streaked cheeks, the way her chin quivered. It was the first crack in her polished armor I'd seen in years. My chest tightened. I reached out and placed a hand over hers. Her skin was cool, damp from tears. "Promise me," I said, voice low, "you'll never be part of anything like that again. No more secrets, no more whispers and shadows. You come to me first, always." She nodded, tears sliding freely now. "I promise." I took a deep breath and squeezed her hand. "I'll protect myself," I said. "I've already spoken with Marcus Ellington and Sarah Collins. We're setting up legal barriers, no contest clauses, trusts, documentation of my mental fitness. They'll file. I'll fight back." Her eyes widened. "You'll fight them in court." "I will," I said, voice steady. "I'm not giving up my home, Emily. Not for Ben, not for anyone. It's where your mother and I built our life. I'll defend it as long as I draw breath." She nodded again, chin wobbling. "And I'll stand with you," she whispered. "I'll tell Marcus what I know. I'll speak against it." I pressed her hand. "Thank you." I stood, drawing her up with me. We faced the lake together, the dark water reflecting the first stars. The breeze carried the scent of roses and pine. "I'm proud of you," I said, placing an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, and I felt the familiar weight of a daughter seeking comfort. "You'll make this right," I added. "Not for the house alone, but for the family we're supposed to be." She nodded, burying her face in my shoulder. I held her until the night fully settled, our silhouettes etched against the lake's silver glow. Betrayal had cut deep, but tonight we'd begun to stitch it closed with truth and loyalty. When we finally walked back to the house side by side, I felt the first stirrings of hope. There were battles ahead, but I wasn't alone. Not anymore. I slipped out of bed around 10:30, the tension in my chest, a dull drumbeat that wouldn't let me rest. The house was silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant croak of a lone frog by the lake. I poured myself a glass of water, then paused at Margaret's portrait above the mantel. Her eyes seemed to follow me, a reminder of promises made. I'd hesitated long enough. It was time to lock down my defenses. I dialed Michael Turner's number first. We'd landed together in Kuwait back in '03, shared foxholes and late-night guard duty. He'd gone into law after retiring, kept his notary commission from years of witnessing veteran affidavits. The phone rang twice before he picked up, still sounding half asleep. "Turner," he mumbled. "Michael." "It's Wesley," I said, voice low. "I need you at your office in an hour. Notary work." His tone shifted. "Colonel Harris." "At midnight, I'm serious," I said. "It's urgent." "Got it," he said after a beat. "Give me 20 minutes to clear my schedule." I ended the call and tossed the glass aside, the water sloshing toward my socks. My heart pounded, adrenaline flirting with fatigue. I paced the hallway, hands clasped behind my back, rehearsing what I'd tell him. New will no contest clause trustees for a veterans charity. It was the standard play, but I needed it ironclad and fast. At 11, I grabbed my car keys and coat, then slipped out the side door. The night was crisp, silver moonlight illuminating the driveway. I drove down the winding road to town, headlights slicing through dark pines. My old pickup purred along tires, crunching the gravel, and I thought about Emily's promise she'd stand with me. That thought warmed me against the chill. I arrived at Michael's office on Main Street just before midnight. His sign, Turner and Associates Notary Public, glowed in the window. I stepped inside, where Michael waited behind a desk strewn with stacks of papers and a single desk lamp. He looked up alert now, suit jacket tossed over the chair back. "Wes," he said, rising. His face was a mix of surprise and concern. "What's going on?" I closed the door behind me. "They're plotting to have me declared incompetent," I said, voice steady. Petition guardianship seize my estate. I need a new will, no contest clause, everything to Veterans Support Fund if anyone challenges. Michael's jaw clenched. Part of the family. My eyes darkened. My son, my daughter, and that fiancé. Emily's okay now, she promised to back me, but I need this done tonight. He nodded and flipped on overhead lights. We'll do it right. Papers whirred as he located my old will folder. I sank into a leather chair and watched him work pulling statutes, drafting language, lining up a notary stamp. His fingers moved with the precision of a surgeon. You know, he said, rifling through papers. No contest clauses. Hold up well in court. It scares off challengers, especially when you funnel everything to a charity. I rubbed my forehead. That's the point. They know I care about veterans. Losing everything to a charity rather than giving them a cent will sting. Michael paused. I'll need your fingerprints witnesses. He peered at the clock. We can have it signed and sealed before 1. I nodded. Let's do it. He spread the new document on the desk. The first page recited my name date and intent to revoke all previous wills and codicils. The next dozens of paragraphs meticulously appointed an executor, Sarah Collins, and trustees for the Veterans Support Fund. Then came the no contest clause. Should any beneficiary or potential beneficiary challenge this instrument or initiate proceedings to contest my capacity, all bequests and devises hereunder to that individual shall be null and void, and the affected share shall be distributed to the aforementioned charity. I scanned the words lines dancing in the lamplight. This was my final stand. I signed my name in bold strokes. Michael notarized it on the spot. He stamped the page and handed me the document rolled in a protective tube. I'll file this first thing in the morning, he said. But legally, it's effective now. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Thank you, Michael. He nodded, packing up papers. Stay safe, Colonel. This fight might get messy. I tucked the tube under my arm and slipped out. The night air greeted me again as I locked the door behind me. In the car, I took out my phone and dialed Sarah Collins. Her number was one I'd used when signing trusts. Years ago, she'd handled Emily's guardianship documents when her mother passed. Sarah Collins, she answered crisp and professional. Sarah, it's Wesley Harris. I need you at your office. New will, urgent family matter, potential dispute. I've just signed. She paused. At this hour, it's critical, I said. Can you review and prepare everything for tomorrow's filing? I need to execute a healthcare proxy and durable power of attorney as well. Understood, she said. I'll be there in 20. I hung up and drove to her downtown office, a sleek suite on the 3rd floor of a brick building. I arrived around 12:45, quietly entered the reception area, and found Sarah waiting with coffee in hand. She wore a navy blazer over dark jeans, business ready at odd hours. Colonel, she said, rising. This better be good. I handed her the notary tube. Michael prepared the will. I need you to draft a healthcare directive power of attorney and confirm the will's legality. We need them in hand by morning. She set down her coffee and unrolled the will on her desk. This is thorough, she said, scanning the pages. I'll draw up the other documents and align them with this. I'll have copies ready for witness signatures at first light. I exhaled, the tension in my shoulders loosening slightly. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate your discretion. She met my gaze. Your family's turning on you. I nodded curtly. They tried to ambush me. It's time I got ahead of it. She tapped her pen against the desk. We'll protect your interests. No contest clause is airtight. As long as you're competent, the court will see any challenge as bad faith. They'll lose. I managed a small smile, something rare these days. That's the idea. She glanced at her watch. It's nearly 1. You should get home. I nodded, gathering my things. Tomorrow I'll need certified copies for safe deposit and original filing. We'll have everything ready, she promised. I stepped into the hallway and paused at the door. The night air was cooler now, dew settling on the asphalt. I locked the office door behind me, sliding the key into my pocket. My reflection in the glass storefront was the silhouette of a determined old soldier. My house, my legacy, would remain mine. Back in the pickup, I rested my head on the steering wheel for a moment, closing my eyes. The fight wasn't over. Emails to draft to Michael and Sarah, calls to trustees, informal alerts to veteran friends who stood ready to vouch for my mental soundness. But tonight, I'd laid the cornerstone of my defense. I started the engine and drove home under the stars. The lake's surface gleamed silver in the moonlight as I passed untouched by the turmoil unfolding. In the quiet of the cabin, I placed the tube on my desk alongside Margaret's photograph and flicked off the light. My will was written, my defenses set. As I slipped beneath the covers, exhaustion claimed me, and for the first time in days, sleep did too, carrying me into a battle-ready dream. I woke before dawn, dressed in the navy suit I'd ordered at Benjamin's insistence. The fabric was crisp, the lapels sharp, nothing like the faded greens and tans of my army days, but it felt right for today. I carefully pinned on Margaret's sapphire and platinum cufflinks, her gift to me on our 20th anniversary, and tucked the small velvet box into my jacket pocket. As I straightened my tie in the hallway mirror, I took a steadying breath. This was the culmination of every battle I'd fought. In the last 2 weeks, legal defenses laid alliances, forged, promises extracted. Now it came down to one final confrontation. Sarah Collins met me in the foyer, briefcase in hand, an expression serious. Her heels clicked on the hardwood as we walked out to my car. "You ready?" she asked quietly. "As I'll ever be," I replied, sliding into the passenger seat. The sky was still pale blue birds calling faintly in the distance. The drive to Willow Creek Country Club was silent, the extra hour of travel a buffer for my nerves. Sarah reviewed the paperwork one last time, certified copies of the New Will Healthcare Proxy Durable Power of Attorney. All stamped, sealed, signed. I could feel their weight in her briefcase, my insurance against every gambit they'd planned. At the club entrance, the valet opened my door. I stepped onto the brick courtyard, feeling every eye on me, wedding staff in crisp black uniforms, early arriving guests in pastel jackets and sundresses. I straightened my posture, reminded myself I was still Colonel Wesley Harris, and I did not back down. Sarah fell into step beside me, silent support. Inside, the bridal suite door stood ajar. I paused in the hallway, tightening my grip on the small velvet box. I could hear Catherine's practiced laughter, light, confident, echoing from beyond. I knocked once, firmly. Benjamin's voice called, "Come in, Dad." Just in time. Stepping through the door, I found them gathered around a low coffee table, Catherine in her silk wrap dress, hair coiffed to perfection, Benjamin in a tailored suit checking his watch, and a silent Lorna Emily's mother-in-law tapping her foot. The room smelled of peonies and fresh linens, a faint undertone of expensive cologne. Chairs and sofas encircled a platter of mini quiches and champagne flutes. Bridesmaids' dresses hung from a rack in the corner, pastel blooms awaiting bodies. I cleared my throat. "Good morning." Sarah closed the door behind us and stood by the entrance. Catherine's smile faltered for the first time. Benjamin raised an eyebrow. We were just going over details, Catherine said, her tone sugary. Venue layout, timing, seating charts. Benjamin stepped forward. Dad, we're grateful you're here. We really needed to talk before the ceremony. His eyes flicked to my lawyer, then back. About the house. I set the velvet box on the table out of sight and took a seat in one of the upholstered armchairs. I'm listening. Catherine handed me a glass of champagne, pink-tinged from strawberry infusion, and poured herself one. She raised hers in a mock toast. To new beginnings. I nodded, lifted the glass politely, and set it down without drinking. Letting the fizz escape my nostrils seemed fitting. Benjamin sat across from me, leaning forward. We've talked with our financial planner, he said. He confirmed what you know, the lake house has tremendous equity. It's an opportunity for all of us. I met his gaze. Opportunities can be dangerous. His jaw clenched. Catherine sat back, folding her hands in her lap. We'd like you to consider gifting the house to us as an early wedding gift, she said, voice level. It's a tradition in some families, passing down the home while the elder is still with us. I paused, feeling the room tilt. Lorna's mouth fell open. Emily's absence suddenly felt conspicuous. The silence stretched pregnant with years of history. I let their words hang a moment. Howe's gift tradition, as though tasting each. Catherine leaned forward. We're asking for your generosity. In return, we'll take care of you, move you closer to town, handle maintenance. Ensure you're never alone. The phrase never alone resonated like a hollow promise. I stood moving to the window. Beyond the glass wedding tents bloomed across manicured lawns. White chairs lined the grass. Soon these grounds would fill with laughter and vows. Here in this suite I felt like the last guest, unwelcome at a party he'd been forced to attend. I turned back to face them. This house isn't a gift to be given away. It's my life's work, built for your mother and me. My voice was calm, but edged with steel. I won't sign anything today, nor any day. The answer is no. Catherine's expression flickered, surprise, anger, hurt, before she masked it. Dad, she said, voice clipped. We thought for family. You thought for yourselves, I cut in, using family as leverage. I gestured at her champagne glass. You offered wine and quiche, but you planned a takeover. That's not tradition, that's betrayal. Benjamin rose, face flushed. We're not betraying you. We're planning responsibly. If you decline, you're forcing us to reconsider our entire future. I held his gaze as Sarah stepped forward, briefcase in hand. Mr. Harris made his decision. Sarah said, voice firm. He's not transferring property, period. I suggest we focus on the ceremony now. Catherine looked at Sarah, then back to me. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I could read the calculus in her eyes, fight here and risk public scandal, or retreat and circle back with another tactic. She chose retreat. Very well, she said, slipping from her chair. We'll respect your wishes. Her smile was brittle. But I hope you enjoy the ceremony. She turned on her heel and walked away, Benjamin following, both of them crowded by quiet defeat. Lorna rose too, smoothing her skirt. She offered me a tentative nod, an apology without words. I stood as they filed past, stepping out into the hallway. The air there felt cool, a brief reprieve before the next storm. I watched from the door as Catherine halted at the corridor's end. She placed a hand on Benjamin's arm, speaking in hushed tones. He shrugged, and they continued down the hall, past the blossoming wedding tents, and onto the green beyond. Sarah and I stood alone in the suite. I breathed deeply, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. The velvet box in my pocket reminded me why I'd come here, to protect my past, my home, my legacy. not in anger, but in duty. "How was that?" Sarah asked, closing the door gently. "Necessary," I replied, buttoning my jacket. I placed the velvet box on the table beside Margaret's photograph. "Let them know I'll attend the wedding. I won't cause a scene, not today. But they understand where I stand." Sarah nodded. "I'll inform the club. They'll adjust any plans that involved your gifting." I smoothed my tie and gave a curt nod. "Thank you." I glanced at my reflection in the mirror, a man in a navy suit, sapphire cufflinks catching the light shoulders, squared with resolve. This was the calm before the ceremony, the point of no return. For some, but for me, another mission accomplished. Outside, I could hear the soft murmur of guests and the distant crack of a trumpet announcing the bride's arrival. I took one last look around the room, bridesmaids' dresses swaying on their hangers, half-eaten pastries cooling on a tray, and then turned to follow the sound of music. Today vows would be exchanged, champagne would flow, and couples would dance beneath the tinted lights. But my vow had already been made to stand firm, to protect what mattered, and to honor the memory of a love stronger than any contract. I strode down the hallway beside Sarah, stepping into the bright morning as the ceremony began. The future awaited, but I was ready. I stepped into the grand ballroom just as the band was striking up the first strains of the couple's march. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across white linens, and guests rose in applause as Benjamin and Catherine took the floor. I wore my navy suit and Margaret's coffin platinum cufflinks, feeling every eye shift toward me as Sarah Collins slipped in beside me firm as steel. A hush rippled through the crowd, some faces registering surprise, others thinly veiled curiosity. I raised a hand to still the applause. The music faltered, then stopped, notes hanging mid-air. Catherine's lips parted in a silent gasp. Benjamin's face drained of color. I held up the small recorder from my jacket pocket and clicked the play button. The curious hum of anticipation swept through the room as the first words crackled out. "I'm telling you, we file the petition immediately. Guardianship. Control of the estate. Then the house is ours." The voice was unmistakably Benjamin's urgent cold. Lorna's gasp rang out behind me. Murmurs rose. "What is this? Is that—" The band faded into silence. Waiters froze glasses mid-air. In that pregnant pause, I could feel every heartbeat in the room. Benjamin's voice continued, joined by Catherine's soft but steely tone. "And if he resists, we threaten the competency hearings. He'll crumble." Then Emily's quiver. "Dad, please." I clicked the recorder off, letting the silence settle like a weight. I stepped forward so everyone could see. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, voice carrying over the hush, "what you just heard is not a rehearsal. It is the cold truth of the conspirators' own words." Gasps and whispers threaded through the guests. Some covered their mouths. A few stepped back from the head table. Benjamin's jaw trembled. Catherine's eyes darted around, seeking an ally. I felt a surge of clarity. This was my moment of justice. "I am Colonel Wesley Harris. I continued, a man who served 35 years defending my country, my word, and my honor. Yet tonight my own son and his fiancée plotted to strip me of my rights and possessions, this home being foremost among them." I swept my arm toward the ornate cake table purposely placed behind the head table. "This property, however grand, does not belong to them." I reached into my pocket and retrieved the velvet tube containing my newly executed will. "This document," I said, holding it aloft, "was signed, sealed, and notarized within the last 72 hours. It revokes all previous instruments and establishes that any challenge to my capacity will forfeit all claims and direct my estate to the Veterans Support Fund, an organization dear to my heart." Sarah stepped forward and unrolled the will on a neighboring table, letting its presence speak volumes. A wave of murmurs followed me as I walked back to the microphone stand. I raised my glass of sparkling water, my only toast tonight. "I withdraw all financial support for this celebration," I announced. "Any and all expenses incurred hereafter are no longer my responsibility." The guests' stunned faces formed a tableau of shock and secrecy exposed. Waiters shifted uneasily. Guests exchanged worried glances, and Benjamin's voice cracked as he whispered to Catherine. I paused, letting the cool silence underscore the finality of my words. "Benjamin, as of this moment, you are no longer my heir. Catherine, you are no longer my daughter-in-law. Lorna," I nodded toward my daughter who stood near the entrance, tears shining in her eyes, "I forgive your hesitation, but not your complicity. Emily," I added, my voice softening as I lifted my daughter's trembling hand, "you stood with me when it mattered most. You remain in my heart and in my will." Emily's shoulders relaxed as she whispered, "Thank you, Dad." Her voice barely audible over the stunned hush. A few guests offered her sympathetic nods. I locked eyes with Benjamin, pride and sorrow warring in my chest. This was the only way to defend what mattered. "I served this country with honor," I said, "and I will serve its values tonight by standing for justice." I turned to the gathering. "I offer an apology to those who witnessed this intrusion. I regret the disruption, but I will not tolerate betrayal in the name of family." At that moment, the room felt both too small and infinitely large. The edge of the cake table now glittered like a battlefield confetti of broken expectations scattered across satin. Benjamin sank onto his chair, burying his face in his hands. Catherine fled the room, the swish of her gown echoing down the hallway. Voices rose in startled chatter. Some guests applauded, uncertain whether to condemn or to cheer. A few older veterans and the crowd friends from the support group stood and saluted me in solidarity. I stepped down from the dais and walked carefully through the stunned guests, Sarah at my elbow. Many parted to let me by heads bowed in respect. I passed tables of murmuring couples, faces bright with sympathy. Each step was a testament I would not be moved. Finally, I stood at the fringe of the dance floor where the DJ fumbled with the mic, uncertain what song to play. I raised Emily's hand in mine. "Shall we?" I asked. She offered a trembling smile and nodded. The band members exchanged glances, then launched into a slow waltz tune, something classic and sorrowful. Sarah stepped back, letting us fill the center of the floor. I placed my hand on Emily's waist, her small hand in mine. We swayed under the glittering lights, moving through the hush as if we belonged to another moment. The crowd parted reverently, giving us space. Whispers settled into murmured blessings. I felt the weight of rightness settle into my shoulders. This was my stand, and I would live with it. As the music played, I caught sight of Marcus Ellington and Diane Reynolds at the edge of the room, arms crossed, nodding in approval. My legal fortress was in place. Behind me, the guests began to join in, forming a ring of solidarity around father and daughter. Benjamin remained seated, face buried, but I knew he would see this one day as his reckoning. When the last note faded, applause rippled through the room, not for the bride and groom, but for the man who refused to be cowed. I guided Emily back to the sidelines, lifted her chin, and whispered, "We're not alone." She nodded, tears in her eyes, but hope in her smile. I straightened my tie, squared my shoulders, and stepped into the bustling reception. The world had shifted tonight. The false front dismantled, the betrayers unmasked, and the legacy of honor reaffirmed. As I passed through clusters of guests, I felt their gratitude and respect buoy me. This was my victory, not over my son, but for the values Margaret and I had built this house upon. The night stretched on champagne glasses, refilled stories, retold in hushed tones, and a new understanding settled in every heart family can fracture. But integrity endures. I took one last look at the head table, empty now except for a trimmed invitation, and felt at peace. My home, my life's work, was secure. I had chosen justice over tradition, truth over convenience, and in doing so I had reclaimed my legacy in the most public way possible. I slipped out of the reception hall under a veil of lantern light, the soft strains of late-night jazz drifting behind me as guests clustered around newfound gossip. The country club's manicured grounds were empty at this hour, dew beating on the lawn lanterns, casting halos in the mist. I walked without direction until the gravel crunch of tires alerted me to another late-night visitor pulling into the lot. A dark sedan eased to a stop. The driver's window lowered, revealing the lined, familiar face of Major David Hayes, retired Marine and old comrade from my second tour in Iraq. His salt and pepper beard caught the soft glow of the parking lot lamp. "Wesley," he called softly, stepping out. He wore civilian clothes now, jeans and a bomber jacket, but his posture was as rigid and assured as ever. "Major Hayes," I replied, blinking against the cool night air. "What brings you out this late?" He offered a half-smile. "I heard there was an incident tonight." His eyes were kind but probing the gaze of a Marine who had seen too much to be surprised. I drew a deep breath, conscious of the velvet cufflinks at my wrists. Margaret's gift and the echo of last night's uproar still vibrating in my mind. "I made some difficult decisions," I said, voice low. "Turns out my own family had other plans for my home." He nodded as if the words made sense without further detail. "I'm sorry, Wes. You did what you had to do." I shrugged, feeling the weight of betrayal settle in my shoulders. "It's done, but I feel unmoored." David stepped closer, offering a flask from his jacket pocket. "For the road?" he asked. I shook my head. He tucked it away again. "Come by the Legion Hall tomorrow evening. We meet at 7. Just some old veterans sharing coffee and stories. No judgments." I hesitated, fear of being alone warred with curiosity. "I've been out of that circle for a while." He clapped me on the shoulder with brotherly certainty. "All the more reason to come back." Before I could reply, he slipped into his car and left me alone under the lantern's glow. I watched the taillights vanish and felt the first stir of something I hadn't known since the reception began relief. I drove home slowly, the lake's mirror still under moonlight, and lay awake, thinking of David's invitation. The next evening I found myself at the Veterans Hall, a brick building overgrown with ivy and memories. A single light glowed inside. I paused at the door, the scent of old wood and coffee drifting out. I touched the brass knob and stepped in. Inside, a dozen men sat around folding tables, coffee cups steaming before them. Some were younger faces, taut with recent service. Others bore silver beards and weathered uniforms hanging on hooks behind them. They looked up as I entered. A ripple of recognition passed through the room when David rose and gave the Marine salute. "Colonel Harris," he announced. "Good to see you." I returned the salute, a little more crooked than I would have liked. He patted the chair beside him. "Grab a cup." I sat, and a washtub-sized thermos passed under the table, filled with dark, bitter brew. I inhaled the rich aroma, memories of field mess tents and midnight watches flooding back. David leaned in. "We've all heard rumors, family squabbles, legal battles. Look, none of us judge. We've been through worse. Take a load off." I let the coffee burn down my throat and scanned the room. A tall Marine veteran nodded at me. A Navy corpsman offered a sympathetic smile. A young soldier with a prosthetic leg raised his cup in greeting. I felt an unexpected swell of kinship. The meeting began quietly, old routines guiding us. First, a moment of silence for fallen brothers. Then each man took a turn sharing a brief update, a new hip replacement, difficulties finding work, the upcoming VA appeal. When it came to me, I spoke of tonight's events in measured detail, mindful of the group's openness. They listened without interruption. When I finished, a sturdy Air Force major with thick glasses laid a hand on my sleeve. "You did right, Colonel. Blood may bind, but honor binds stronger." A few nodded, others murmured assent. I felt tears sting my eyes, one of the few vulnerabilities I allowed here. These men, strangers until now, offered their respect as freely as they'd have thrown me a lifeline in combat. After formalities, we moved into small group discussions. Some planning a veterans outreach program, others organizing a fundraiser for homeless vets. My legal victories and public stand became a lesson fight for what matters. Accept allies where you find them. David leaned over as I excused myself to refill my cup. "You see," he said softly, "you're not alone. This is your family now, too." I nodded, tasting the coffee's strength. I realized how I'd craved this simple solidarity, men bound by service, not blood, who understood my code. Over the next hour, I helped sketch out plans for a winter coat drive for veterans in need. I offered to host the drop-off site at my lake house once the temperatures dropped. They cheered the idea, already imagining the work parties and shared dinners around the fire pit. When the meeting broke up, I found myself lingering as the last few men filed out. David and I walked to the door together. "You did good tonight," he said, easing the heavy door closed behind us. "We'll meet here every Wednesday. You should come, no pressure, just fellowship." I studied his face, lined but resolute, and nodded. "I will." He clasped my shoulder. "Semper Fi, Colonel." "Semper Fi," I replied, and we parted with a firm grip. The walk back to my car felt lighter than any I'd taken in weeks. The stars burned bright overhead, and I realized that home wasn't just the lake house. Now it was here in shared purpose and mutual respect. I drove back through the silent streets, the plan for veterans' coats filling my mind and warming my heart. At home, I stood on the porch, the world quiet once more. I gazed at the empty chair by the rose garden, soon to be a gathering spot for work parties, and smiled at the promise of new beginnings. Margaret's presence felt near approving of the legacy I was building, not just a house filled with memories, but a haven for those who'd served alongside me. I closed my eyes, inhaling the night air, scented with pine and rose. Shunned by blood, I had found kinship by choice. And in that choice, I discovered a new brotherhood, one that would stand by me as I stood by them in service of something greater than ourselves. That morning, the first beams of sunrise slipped over Lake Greenwood as I unlocked the front gate and surveyed the progress. What had once been my sprawling, half-empty home now hummed with purpose. The top-floor bedrooms, once silent and closed off, were newly painted in warm shades of cream and slate blue. Veteran Support Fund volunteers, some with calloused hands from construction, others in borrowed work gloves, moved furniture into place. The scent of fresh pine wood from the built-in bookcases and the tang of paint still in the air reminded me how far we'd come. Inside, I found Lily Emily's daughter, kneeling beside a stack of patterned throw pillows. At 19, she'd just started college, but spent every weekend here, energy and creativity, her tools of choice. "Grandpa," she said, looking up with a grin that mirrored her mother's, "I think the living room needs one more accent wall. The veterans need a spot that feels like home, not a dorm." She held up a swatch of teal fabric. I nodded. Her eyes were bright with that same spark Margaret once had when planning a new garden. We stepped into the first bedroom where 2 single beds stood on opposite walls connected by a shared nightstand. Lily pointed out the framed photographs on the shelves, black and white portraits of veterans, some in uniform, some at home with their families. "They'll want to see faces they recognize," she said, careful and thoughtful. I ran a hand over the photos, Marcus in his notary uniform, Major Hayes with a group of Marines, even a reluctant me in fatigues. Each photograph honored a life of service and loss, and now held a promise of welcome. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls. I'd contracted a local caterer, a veteran-owned bakery, to supply breakfast each morning. I poured myself a cup and paused at the counter, listening to the veterans chat about the day's schedule. Job search workshops, therapy sessions in the study, a woodworking project in the garage. They laughed as one man showed off a new adaptive tool he'd learned to use. The room felt alive, not with whispers of betrayal, but with the sturdy hum of community. Over the next week, work continued in every corner. The old guest bathroom transformed into an accessible shower room with grab bars and a zero-entry threshold. The formal dining room repurposed as a common area with plush couches and a bookcase stocked with maps, history books, and classic novels. The back porch rebuilt with a ramp for wheelchair access, overlooking the lake where dragonflies skimmed the surface. Each nail I hammered carried memories of my past life, now repurposed for a future of solidarity and service. When the invitations went out for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I felt a flutter in my chest akin to the first morning of military service, a blend of pride, anticipation, and just a touch of anxiety. Would we fill the rooms with veterans in need? Would the families we lost alongside feel welcome here? I sorted through RSVP cards that weekend. Confirmations from 6 veterans ready to move in, plus representatives from the Veterans Support Fund, local city council members and families from the support group. Lily helped me address envelopes in my study, her handwriting neat and flowing, sprinkling mother-of-pearl stickers like confetti. On the day itself, the lawn was dotted with folding chairs. The porch festooned with bunting in red, white, and blue. A simple podium stood at the edge of the wheelchair-accessible ramp. I stood beside Lily, her fingers wrapped around mine, and watched as Marty Sanchez, one of the first residents, rolled up in his wheelchair with a shy wave. He'd lost his leg in Kandahar, but kept his wry sense of humor intact. "Looks good, Colonel," he said quietly. "Feels like home already." I squeezed his shoulder, feeling the weight of his words. When the guests arrived, I climbed the steps to the podium and cleared my throat. The murmurs faded as veterans' families and city officials turned toward me. Lily held the ribbon taut across 2 stakes while I unwrapped the ceremonial scissors. I glanced at her, her face glowing with excitement and nerves. I leaned down and whispered, "Ready?" She nodded. I lifted the scissors. "Thank you all for coming," I began, voice steady under the warm midday sun. "This house was built for my wife Margaret and our family. It was once a place of solitude and loss until we decided to open its doors to those who, like me, answered the call of duty and paid the price. I paused, letting the significance settle. Today, we transform this home into a haven for veterans in need, a place of respect, camaraderie, and new beginnings. I gestured to Lily. With help from my granddaughter Lily and all of you, we've created more than a boarding house. We've created a family. Applause rippled across the lawn as I cut the ribbon. Lily beamed and helped me open the front door. We stepped inside together, greeted by the veterans who formed a welcoming arch. They clapped and cheered as we passed, their smiles honest and wide. I felt tears prick my eyes. This was the homecoming I'd longed for, not of blood, but of shared purpose. Throughout the afternoon, I watched Lily leading tours, showing one veteran her newly painted room, explaining the layout of the common areas to another, and describing the garden plan for spring plantings. She spoke with the confidence of someone who believed in what we'd built. I circulated among the guests, sharing coffee with city officials, discussing expansion plans with Veteran Support Fund representatives, and reminiscing with my old friend David Hayes about how far we'd come. As the sun dipped toward the lake's horizon, Lily found me on the back ramp, watching the dragonflies dance above the water. She folded her arms around me and leaned her head on my shoulder. "Grandpa," she said, "they're moving in next week. I can't wait." I wrapped an arm around her. "Me neither," I replied. I thought of Margaret's gentle smile, of Emily's tears of relief, and of the sound of laughter echoing through this house once more. This home, my home, had been a shrine to memories of loss and betrayal. Today, it was reborn as a sanctuary for those who deserved it most, men and women bound by service, healing side by side in rooms I'd once built alone. I looked at the veterans inside, Marty chatting with the caterer, another veteran studying a map of national parks, a young Marine writing a letter in the study. Their presence filled every corner with possibility. I realized then that this house, too, had found its purpose, not as a monument to what was gone, but as a beacon of what could be. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the gentle breeze off the lake and the warmth of Lily's hand in mine. Home was no longer a solitary place of memory. It was alive with laughter, conversation, and shared dreams. And in that moment of rebirth, I knew this was exactly where I belonged.